Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to be running you over what it actually takes to become lean and athletic. This is the physique that everyone wants to achieve, but they're unsure of how to do it. And in order to become lean and athletic, most people would benefit from building lean muscle mass and dropping body fat at the same time, which is possible. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name's Joe. I run an online coaching brand called Athletic Aesthetic. We work with professionals and we specialize in helping people build muscle and lose fat and optimize their routine. So the first step before we even get into training and nutrition to becoming lean and athletic, dropping body fat, building muscle, it comes down to mindset. Now, I really do think this underpins everything. I've coached hundreds of people, obviously trained myself for over 14 years. If you don't have a strong mindset and you've not got the right frame of mind when you're approaching your training and nutrition, you're really going to struggle to lean down, because this doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take months, potentially years of training. So you need to be very consistent over a long period of time. And the choices, well, you're going to need to make certain choices and make certain sacrifices along your training journey that will contribute to you becoming lean in the long term. Now, you know, if you're eating out 4 or 5 times a week, maybe we want to consider dropping that down a little bit and going out maybe between, 2 or 3 times instead. When you're out on those meals out and you're making those nutritional decisions, you're gonna need to think like someone who is already lean and athletic, who wants to get there, which comes on to the next thing in terms of identity. Even if you've got the higher body fat percentage at the moment, you know what you're working towards. And again, that will dictate your decisions when it comes to social events, going out and doing the steps when you don't want to do it, having a non-negotiable training routine, which we will get onto in a second. But I think honestly, the biggest thing with mindset, provided that you're in a good routine with your training, is being able to say no in certain situations. And as I say, if you are having those meals out, not ordering 3 courses all the time. It doesn't mean being restrictive with your nutrition. It just means making the right decisions and thinking like someone who really does want to lean down. I don't know anyone who's lean, and what I would class lean as is, between probably 10 to 13% body fat. None of these people make consistent per decisions with their nutrition. They've got a non-negotiable mindset when it comes to their training and their routine in general. So mindset is absolutely essential before we even get into anything else. So the next step is to set clear goals. Now, if you're wanting to become lean and athletic, then that is a physique, body composition focused goal. So you might have, as we were saying before, a certain body fat percentage that you want to hit. You might have a certain level of leanness that you know what that looks like that you want to achieve, and you might be wanting to build a certain amount of muscle as well. Do you have an event that you're working towards, whether that's a wedding, a holiday, or maybe literally just a date in your calendar? This definitely isn't essential, but I think sometimes, again, working with loads of clients, I think the ones that have events that they're working towards are probably a little bit more motivated. And I know it's cliche, like you can't always rely on motivation to help you achieve your goal, but it can be a useful tool. And from a coaching standpoint, it's really nice to have something in the calendar that we're aiming towards, and then we have a plan in place for once we've achieved that as well. In terms of setting your goals, they need to be challenging, but they also have to be realistic. Like if someone has 60 pounds of weight to lose, they're not going to lose that in 5 to 6 weeks. If someone wants to drop 15 pounds of body fat, they can achieve that in 8 weeks. That's going to be challenging, but it's also realistic. So you have to be realistic with what you're trying to achieve, and challenge is part of the process, and it's enjoyable when you're obviously working towards the challenge as well. So setting the goal is really important. If you don't have a goal and you don't roughly know where you're wanting to get to, you're not going to be able to build a plan to do that. It's not enough to just be like, yeah, I just want to lose weight. Like you need to have a reason why you're doing it, and you need to have a rough number that you're trying to hit if obviously you're trying to work towards a certain weight. So in terms of training, it's obviously going to be a hugely important part of leaning down and building muscle. You need to have a structure that's realistic for you to stick to year round within reason. So whenever we have someone come on board, they're usually very excited and they want to train every single day. For most people, that's totally unrealistic, especially if you're busy, you're traveling for work, holidays and things like that. In terms of the amount of training sessions that you do per week, it really is individual dependent, and we've got a separate video on that you should go and watch. But I would say for most people that are wanting to lean down and build muscle, you probably want to be training 4 to 5 times a week. So strength training, 3 to 4 strength training sessions per week would be absolutely perfect. If you were doing 3 days per week, probably something like an upper lower full body split. If you were training 4 days a week, potentially 2 upper, 2 lower. But again, the training split really is person dependent, and it depends on the muscle groups that they want to develop, what sort of gym they go into as well. Cardio is not essential to get lean, but it is a useful tool that you can use to promote further fat loss and elevate your expenditure. So essentially, if you had two individuals, one of them was doing more cardio, that person would be able to lean down quicker and potentially on higher calories as well because they're more active. It goes without saying, within the training program, you need to focus on 100% compliance. So having a non-negotiable attitude towards your training and just never missing training sessions. Obviously, some weeks things are going to come up. If you miss, let's say, 1 or 2 workouts a month, it's really not going to make too much difference to your overall results. But I think trying to get into the habit of just never ever missing training, you're going to definitely get better results over a long period of time. And the clients that I've worked with who have that attitude, they always get a better result, because if you start missing training sessions, you're always going to find reasons why you can miss more of them. So I would focus on 100% compliance. I haven't missed a training session in like the last 5 years. And the training, it needs to be adaptable as well to your life, what you've got going on with your work. So if you are someone that travels once every 2 weeks for work, we've got various clients like that. The training program that you follow, it needs to be adaptable for potentially subpar gyms. So cheap commercial gyms where you can buy day passes, or hotel gyms where you maybe don't have as much access to as much weight or as good kit. And that's something that obviously we work with our clients within our program, is we'll adapt the training program for them so that if they are traveling, they can stay consistent and they can still create that intensity in the gym, even if they don't have access to weight or the usual bits of equipment. So training, you need to have a structure, you need to have a good balance of strength versus cardio. But the best way to think about it is the strength training is going to be responsible for changing your physique and the way you look. So you definitely want to be doing more strength training versus cardio if you're only training 4 or 5 days a week. You need to focus on basically never ever missing training sessions. And you also need to follow a plan that's adaptable for your schedule and your routine. So in terms of nutrition, we have a separate, more in-depth video on this that you should definitely check out. But just to give you a bit of an overview, I think you will find it hard to lean down consistently over time unless you are tracking calories, or unless you've had previous experience of tracking calories for a long amount of time. Now, I've tracked my nutrition for over 8 years, and even when I take time off tracking, I realize that I'm not as close to my targets as I thought I was in terms of macros. I'll get onto that in a second. I know tracking calories can get a little bit of a bad rap. Some people say that it promotes an unhealthy relationship with food. Some people say it's obsessive. Some people say that it takes too much time. But I would say if you don't have any history of having an eating disorder, then tracking calories is a very useful tool for you to gain the knowledge about the calorie intake of certain foods. Because to be honest, most of the population don't understand how many calories they're consuming. They don't really understand what they're putting in their body. In terms of the objection of it taking too much time, what I say to people is, once you get into the rhythm of tracking and using MyFitnessPal, it should take you less than 10 minutes a day. If it doesn't, then you're doing something wrong. And you dedicating that 10 minutes of time to tracking is the difference between you being overweight and unhappy with the way you look and you being in amazing shape. So I would definitely recommend tracking. I track every single day. It takes me less than 5 minutes. Macronutrients, again, we go into more depth in the other nutrition video, but to give you a bit of an insight, you need to set up your macros to suit your goals of dropping body fat and building muscle. So for pretty much everyone, they're going to need a high protein and a high carbohydrate diet. Generally for males, we'll go for 2 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. If you were an 80 kg individual like myself, I would look to consume between 60 to 80 grams of fat per day, depending on whether you enjoy eating a slightly higher fat diet. Now, I wouldn't class 80 grams of fat as a high fat diet, but it's obviously higher than 60 grams. And then the rest of your calories would come from your carbohydrates, and you want to focus on prioritizing your carbohydrate intake around training to promote your training performance and focus on a relatively even distribution of protein throughout the day. So if your target, like myself, is, I think it's 176 grams of protein, I like to eat 3 meals per day. I'm gonna have 3 protein servings of between 45 to 50 grams in each of my meals. And if I'm a little bit short at the end of the day with my protein, then I'd probably have a protein shake or something like that. Don't overthink it too much. Focus on total calorie intake and then evenly distribute your protein. Prioritize carbohydrates around training. And something that a lot of people don't like to hear sometimes is that you might actually just have to remove certain foods from your diet to achieve your goal. If you've been eating processed junk food 4 to 5 times per week, it's totally unrealistic to think that you can get under 13% body fat, continuing to do that. So it doesn't mean that you're removing them completely and forever, but maybe consider removing them for a period of time. Like I know of myself, if I have biscuits in my cupboard, they're going to get eaten. So I just don't buy them. I don't get them. And again, I think a lot of people say that that promotes an unhealthy relationship with food, but those are the people that aren't in very good shape. So yeah, that's nutrition. So the next part of your routine to become lean and athletic is going to come down to your expenditure. Now, if you control your nutritional intake, like I mentioned before, and you control your expenditure, you will then have the ability to either lose weight, maintain weight, or gain weight. So expenditure is going to be made up of your step count, your movement daily, and then any cardio that you're doing within your training program. Now, as I mentioned before, cardio is not essential to get lean, but it's going to allow you to burn more calories throughout the day. So in theory, you could lean down whilst consuming more calories. Same with the strength training, it needs to be consistent. There's no point doing 3 or 4 hours of cardio one week because you'll probably drop a fair bit of weight. And then if you don't do it the next week, body weight might plateau. So whatever you choose to do with cardio, try and keep it consistent, try and keep it relatively progressive in nature as well. If you start by doing 3 by 30 minutes of cardio one week, maybe in month 2, you could increase that to 3 by 40, for example. Steps, obviously that's your movement outside of your training day to day. And it goes without saying, the people that maintain a higher step count and are therefore less sedentary, I would say generally they probably maintain a leaner composition year round. So this is a really, really useful tool that you can use to promote fat loss. And the reason I'm a really big advocate of maintaining a high step count is because it's low intensity in nature, so it really will not affect your recovery and therefore your training performance, which means that you can still put loads of energy into your training to help you build muscle, actually build a really good physique. And because it's low intensity as well, it will basically not spike your appetite. If you start doing loads of high intensity interval training, loads of long runs and things like that, that is going to increase your appetite, which is going to make it harder for you to stick to your nutrition target. So a good place to start, I think, for most people, if let's say they were strength training 3 times a week, I think anyone who's got a fat loss goal should be doing minimum 8,000 steps a day, preferably 10,000. We've had clients that have done 12, 15,000 steps a day. But again, it really just depends how much time you have to dedicate to that. And cardio, you could start by just doing 60 minutes of cardio a week and then building that up over time. So expenditure is really, really important. And without visibility of that and without knowing what you're doing each week and tracking it, you're really just shooting in the dark. It's like someone not tracking calories. That's really, really important. And the final part to becoming lean and athletic and achieving the physique that you want is sleep and recovery. Now, probably should have put sleep at the start of the video because it really is the foundation of your health. If you're underslept and you're sleep deprived, you're going to find that your appetite, hormones, leptin and ghrelin are unregulated, and you'll probably find that you crave more junk food and sugary food more. Appetite essentially will be more variable throughout the day and throughout the week. So from a fat loss standpoint, it's going to make it harder for you to stick to the potentially lower calories that you're on. Sleep as well, obviously massively, it is the key determining factor of your overall recovery. So if you're underslept, your ability to recover from your training sessions will be less. So if you had an underslept individual across the course of months and years, that person would definitely build less lean muscle mass than someone who was sleeping enough. I would definitely recommend tracking your sleep just for accountability. A lot of people think time in bed equals sleep. If you spend 8 hours in bed, it does not necessarily mean that it definitely doesn't necessarily mean that you've slept 8 hours. You're probably sleeping closer to 7, maybe even a little bit less. So sleep is hugely, hugely important. I think, it really does affect motivation as well. I've noticed the clients that get less sleep, they're less motivated to train because when you are sleep deprived, your body literally just wants to focus on survival and focusing on the basic bodily functions as opposed to going to the gym, which is, I guess, considered a luxury. So sleep first, always prioritize that. Once you've nailed training, nutrition and sleep, then you could start to move on to other recovery protocols like saunas and massages. These things will give you, maybe the extra 2 to 5% in your routine, but you're going to get the biggest ROI from nailing your sleep routine, hitting your training program and hitting your nutrition targets as well. I see so many people that are trying to lose weight, always in the sauna, always doing massages, breath work and stuff like that. If you've got any extra free time in your routine and you're trying to lose weight and you're not where you want to be, you should be allocating that towards your training, optimizing your nutrition and probably doing more steps. So sleep and recovery, especially important. This really is the foundation of health. These two things, saunas, massages, other recovery protocols like that, can be adhered to later down the line. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you a bit of an insight into, I guess, what you really need to do to achieve an amazing physique, and not just achieve it, but sustain it long term. If you'd be interested in finding out how we can help you and finding out more about our coaching program at Athletic Aesthetic, there will be an inquiry link in the bio of this video. You can apply through there and I'll be in touch to arrange a free consultation call.